If I told you an off-meta Bastion strat beat a pro team, would you believe me?
Now you switched up and I don't believe it. One hand in the air feeling like the Kembe when I block the demons. No matter where it's fit, no matter where we're.
Bastion has one of the most comically awful pick and win rates I've ever seen. So believe my shock when a pro team, SSG, pull out a slightly disrespectful Bastion strat.
That's disrespectful as shit, bruh.
And even better, they won the map in just over 5 minutes. So get ready for some deadly Bastion turrets, a secret twist at the end, and some questionable counterswaps.
Nah, that ain't it, y'all.
The match we'll be looking at is between SSG and Sakura, with Chronic pulling out the Bastion on Esperanza. To help break this down, I'm going to be using my usual 3-level pyramids, increasing in complexity so you get smarter. Cycles and overloading are the first layer. Basically, the Bastion, Sim and Zarya create a highly cyclical comp, meaning that when you combine Zarya bubbles, a Sim TP, and a Bastion form, your potential power is very high. And of course, this might sound familiar if you watched my previous Bastion strat video. But now, the question is, what makes this strat suddenly relevant? Well, notice how back then, the tank being played was Ramattra. Nowadays, it's Zarya. But one of Zarya's biggest weaknesses historically is that she's incredibly squishy. The Bastion capitalizes on that weakness in spades thanks to your turret ability, a fuck ton of bullets.
I've yet to meet one that can outsmart Bullet.
Chronic just mows down the Reaper and eventually the Zarya, leading to an easy first fight win. In fact, CJ, the Kiriko player, mentioned exploiting Zarya's squishiness in his post-match interview.
What if we just go like Bastion Sim and just like run over the Zarya because you can't play the game?
Now, Zeb immediately counterswaps to the Devil Incarnate, which we will talk about. But surely there's just more to the story than just basically doing WM1 like a TF2 Pyro player. And you'd be right. Before we even get into using turrets, Zomba gets his recall forced out thanks to a clutch kunai hit by CJ. The reason this matters is that you don't want a Tracer or a Reaper coming from behind while you push forward on your cycle. In fact, Zomba knows this, so he tries to go around the other side to get that pincer. But sugar-free sim turrets put a serious dent in how fast Zomba can move, meaning the whole of SSG can just speed past the Tracer angle. This is the core idea of overloading, pushing a group of players where you have the man advantage. In this case, because the Lucio Tracer are busy jacking off to a fucking sim turret, the Bastion just takes a 5v3 on the front line, overloading the Zarya Reaper. Speaking of the sim, her TP here is mainly used as a distraction to draw aggression, but stick around and you'll see more creative TPs. Now having won the first fight, PDK swaps from Reaper onto Sojourn and Zeb sadly goes onto Orisa. The idea being that Sojourn can easily avoid that Bastion cycle and farm up her railgun off his big ass hitbox. The Orisa pick in theory allows her to more easily reach the Bastion or retreat away from his turret cycle. However, things go a different way this fight. It starts with Chronic going up to the high grounds alongside his team to clear the Lucio Tracer. Even sugar-free TPs to the high grounds, and sadly, the Lucio gets wasted, feeding his brains out. But while the Bastion and his team clear the Lucio Tracer, the two counterswaps can't get involved. How is this possible? Well, that leads me onto the second layer of the Bastion comp, split pushing. Very simply, the Zarya can hold off and zone the Orisa Sojourn Kiriko, basically taking a 1v3, while the rest of the team splits and pushes the Lucio Tracer, taking a 4v2. The reason this works is because Zarya does have a good matchup into Orisa, and she can't get ran over because the Lucio is with the Tracer. As long as Hawk just keeps his distance and threatens that Sojourn walk up, the Bastion is free to run around and chase kills. Shout out to Commander X because he talked about this during the last Overwatch World Cup. Just after the Lucio kill though, Chronic hits an insane grenade kill onto PDK. That's in part to the well-hidden sim turrets that barely touches the Sojourn, giving those wall hacks. As a result, SSG are able to cap the point in under 2 minutes, but we're not done there. Realizing that the enemy Sojourn is literally in spawn, and that the enemy Tracer is pretty far away, what if you took a 5v3 and overloaded the Orisa? Well, that's exactly what we see, as Sugarfree plops down his TP, and Chronic is ready to mow down with his turret form. Z tries and fights back with his Kitsune, but it's still just too much for Orisa to handle. And now, looking at the ult economy, because of the 2 counterswaps, lost fights, and a wasted Kitsune, it's not looking good for Sakura.
It's not looking good, bruv. It's not looking good.
For now, the Bastion team continues to overload the Orisa. It starts with Zomba getting all his blinks forced out in quick succession before Chronic takes a TP straight to the Orisa, finishing them off with a nade. Zomba tries to make a move onto Chronic, but he also gets forced out by a nade, wasting his pulse bomb. Now, I don't know why you'd pulse when your Orisa's dead, maybe the lights were too bright, who knows. Obviously, playing Orisa into a double beam comp isn't fun, and Orisa isn't really a counter to this at all. But there are counters, which I'm gonna tease for later on. Now, if you're especially goated on Bastion, you would have spotted that Chronic refreshes his nade, otherwise known as the Bounty Boogie Bomb. That's thanks to the brand new nade perk, which refreshes the nade cooldown every time you change configurations. If I have a nade counter in the bottom right, you can see that I get up to 4 nades just by switching forms, which includes your artillery strike too. Now, I'd love to talk about your major perks, but this map is so one-sided that Chronic doesn't even get his major perk in time. Thankfully, I've talked about your major perks in the past, and in short, the perk where you can switch guns is underrated, especially for zoning or catching enemies behind cover, but most of the time, you probably should go for the healing. The bans are even more interesting than the perks though. Sakura banned Freya, while SSG banned Sigma. Not gonna lie, Sakura kinda shot themselves in the foot with that Freya ban. We've seen her as a counter to sim comps in the past, and she was played against Bastion too. She just farms up Bola, and with it, she's got enough damage to punish that Bastion cycle. Not to mention, CJ did say that the ban scenario allowed them to play Bastion, so obviously we can't forget the Sigma ban too. Sigma is easier to run compared to Zarya because he can play distance, and your Flux is great at punishing Bastion sim. Speaking of which, that's actually the third and last layer of the comp, finding a way of beating Bastion. Listen, if I told you a team with 5 ultimates and a 100+ meter lead still lost this fight, you'd call me crazy. The fight starts with a simple overload push onto the Orisa, strengthened by the Kitsune rush. However, Zeb's able to spin away back to safety, but more importantly, both DPS players are in perfect positions to punish the Bastion push. As a result, PDK catches a juicy headshot onto the Lucio, which is eventually converted into a kill. Meanwhile, Chronic's head is on a swivel, desperately trying to find the target to mow down. From there, SSG's new game plan is to apply as much point pressure as possible with the Simwall, Grav, and Bastion ults. While the Bastion ult doesn't find much, neither does Natsuki's sad solo beats. Now, Zeb does need to touch with Terra Surge, but it does more than enough damage despite the Bastion finding the Lucio kill. What really makes SSG lose the fight here though, is Lep not having that beat for the fight. Dying early sucks. Shocker. So that's one way of beating Bastion. Good DPS setup and a tank that plays distance. So how does SSG respond? Well, having a better ult is one of them. In what's basically the last fight, Chronic starts by chilling on the high grounds with the enemy tracer behind. Soon after, Sakura popped down the Kitsune rush to push out the high ground, and their DPS angles aren't that bad. The issue is that Lep's got beats, which allows Chronic to walk pretty much as aggressively as he wants to mow down that Orisa. Despite the beat though, Chronic's still left in an awkward position, dying first on SSG. It's just Z who dies prematurely on Kiriko, and it's basically what loses this fight. With the Kiriko dead, it's just a matter of cleanup for SSG, but next fight gets even crazier. Sugar-Free does this insane TP onto the Sojourn to overload her, while Chronic pops the form to get that powerful cycle off. This might look simple on the surface, but there's a very key reason as to why this works. Simply put, there's no line of sight between the Sojourn and her team. This means that she basically gets no help the entire time, and not to mention, there isn't an obvious retreat path. Sliding in front of your Orisa would have certainly helped, but it's super tough to do this in the heat of the moment. Now, Sakura do steal the bots, but they're taking a 5v4. Zomba, thinking he's him, but he's really not, triple blinks behind to try and get a pulse, but just falls over before he even gets the chance. Now armed with a bunch of ultimates, and soon killing Zeb, the map gets finished in a staggering 5 minutes and 22 seconds. But surely that can't be it, right? there had to have been something to beat the Bastion sim. And actually, there is. But before I reveal it, I need to plug my coaching. I've got a separate coaching channel so you can see what it looks like, but click the link down below. Now, I consulted ex-tier 1 coach, Capitology, who told me that Sakura themselves couldn't do anything due to the limited hero pools. But that Doomfist and Venture could be a viable counterswap, and I wonder where I've seen that one before. If you guys don't know, I made a video on a Doom Widow Venture strats that you might have seen, and there's a familiar face in this match.
I know that ain't who I think it is.
But why would a Doom Venture and even Widow be viable here? Well, it's to avoid and punish that cycle. Avoiding the Bastion cycle as Doomfist is obvious. You can just punch out and leave, or pop your Meteor Strike. But sadly, someone like Orisa can't just do that. And as for punishing, look at the last TP we saw. What the hell can Orisa do to punish that? Stare at it and do fuck all? Doom on the other hand, can quickly slam to where the TP was, farm punch, and punish as needed. Now, in fairness, Sakura probably can't play this comp, and even if it worked, SSG would have gone to some more generic meta comp. But it's nice to see how we can out-cheese the cheese comp, and it certainly would have been a once-in-a-lifetime matchup. Anyways, click these Bastion videos on screen if you like this one, and until next time.